The Big Footy Port Adelaide podcast is proudly sponsored by New Vision.
My team, Conda, power. I love the power. I love the power.
G'day everyone, Mac19 here, and this is the Big Footy Port Adelaide podcast coming to you live again on Port Fan Radio. Look, joining me in the co-host chair, as always, we've got Portia.
G'day, Macca. What a fantastic week in football.
It's been a great one, hasn't it?
Yeah. Really
It's
exciting.
been like one big troll. It's been fantastic.
I think that's probably a good way to put it, for sure. But, yeah, I think we've got 2 rounds left. I think we'll just, we'll see how we go.
That's it. Absolutely. And back on the podcast is Sergeant Schultz.
How we going, everyone?
Welcome.
G'day, Sarge.
Howdy. It's pretty good being the biggest club in the state for the first time. Actually, not the first time, but the first time since 1990.
Yeah. I think that I love the idea of it, and I love that it's something we can brag about. But I think the fact that members officially counts anything that's like $50 or over, as long as it's not an animal. It's kind of a really weird definition. And like $50 membership, what does that actually pay for the club as far as revenue coming in? I wouldn't have thought it'd be all that much after you give out the basic gear and handle the sales and all that sort of thing. It's what is it? It's a bit like how world records, or not world records, like finish. Oh, there's a comparison I can't think of. Someone else talk for a bit and I'll try and see if I can think of it.
Well, of course, what we're talking about is the AFL have released their audited membership figures across the league, and it was pretty happy news for Port Adelaide. 54,057 official members going by their categories, which is up by 10% on last year, and amusingly more than the Crows.
Very amusingly when Andrew Fagan comes out and says he doesn't care about it, but he does care about it, but he doesn't.
That's it. It's not relevant, but I'm going to give 8 excuses, and you know what? We can beat it anyway if we wanted to, but we just chose not to. It's wonderful.
Well, what was it we were talking about last week? Hawthorn had 70,000 members and they had 28,000 at the game on the weekend. It's kind of meaningless, and I guess what I was thinking of earlier is that it makes the records a farce when you're including such a broad definition of membership. It's a bit like drug taking for baseball, how they talk about Barry Bonds, how there's going to be asterisks next to his name because of all the drugs and all that sort of thing that sort of go throughout in baseball. It's like, it's like setting a record, but you're doing it in a dodgy way. And I feel that's really kind of what's happening here. I think if you look at revenue, like not just revenue, I think probably profit per membership, I can't imagine that we are really significantly ahead of any other club. If we are even, I think we probably sold a lot of those 3-gamers.
I saw the West Coast Eagles have about, 60,000 members, but their average crowd is 35 and their stadium holds 40. So that's 20,000 paid up members who can't get to a game.
And they pay something like $150 to $200 just to be on the waiting list.
Yeah, that's insane.
You print your own money when you do that.
Yeah, well, that's where the real money is, isn't it? Anything that gets you a good amount of money but costs not a lot to administrate, that's pretty good. But when you're talking about the $70, $75 memberships where you don't attend games and you get your membership kit, and that's what I would imagine that would probably eat away from that pretty quickly.
Yes, no doubt. And I guess the good thing to come out of this is we know exactly how many sort of 11-game members we've got. We've got 38,500, which is pretty bloody decent, I reckon, compared to Adelaide's, which is 42.5. I know a lot of Crows fans like to think that half our membership's either Crow supporters trying to get into showdowns or pets or dogs or whatever, but to be only 4,000 less season ticket holders than them, I think is a pretty good spot. And as has been said, it means that we can sell more three-game memberships, which means we can double or triple sell those seats throughout the year and generally still get the same end income from them.
Well, it's amazing when you think that this year attendance floor was 33,000, but only 2011 or 12, our average crowd was 19,000. So we've sort of lost perspective a little bit in some ways when we got disappointed with that Giants crowd.
I kind of agree, but also I think we do need to be very mindful of the fact that we've still got new stadium smell. Um, the
Yeah.
team's going pretty well. Adelaide Oval's still brand spanking new, and everyone's in love with it. You know, we've still got people coming from interstate who haven't seen Port Adelaide or anyone play at the Adelaide Oval before. And that's going to be certainly peaking over this first 5 years of the stadium, and then after that, it'll have been there once, and then they'll make their decision on whether they actually like the stadium or not. And so that's going to be interesting how it's maintained. Can our crowds survive a significant dip in form, like we're talking about 2011, 2012 style shitness, rather than just annoying shit like this year? So I think that we do need to be aware that we do have a high attendance at the ground for reasons compared to what it was at Footy Park, for reasons more than just we changed ground. It's that newness factor, the hatred of Footy Park, and just the fact that we're a more interesting team to watch now.
I guess that's the end of that segment, so we'll move on and talk about the preview of this weekend's game, which is Port versus Gold Coast at Metricon Stadium on Saturday night. We've got a 4-1 win-loss record against the Suns. How much of the Suns have you guys seen this year?
Not a lot. Probably 2 games, I'd say.
Yeah, I can't actually think of a game I've seen them. I think I might have seen one game with Ablett and he got injured, but...
Yeah.
Yeah, for me, they're probably the team that I've seen least of this year. Maybe 4 or 5 games, that would be about it. And they've just been decimated by injuries, and certainly 2015 hasn't gone the way that I think Sun supporters and I guess everyone across the AFL expected Gold Coast season to go. They've only had 2 players play every game, and that's a first year and a second year player, which is quite extraordinary.
Yeah, look, they've had a really awful run, and certainly a little bit of messing around on the edge with Harley Bennell mid-year. That certainly doesn't help you at all, does it? It's a really awkward thing. I mean, we've always known that the Gold Coast is a hard place to have a football side from, and that's in any code. What was it, Gold Coast United? They were not exactly successful. The Carrara Bears, they were not exactly going anywhere when they were there. It's just, I think it's just much harder to get players to focus, because it's what happens when players are thinking, oh, well, we can play for a real football club, or we can go and spend our life on the Gold Coast. It's very hard not to get caught up in that lifestyle. It was basically built on the dreams of Miami Vice in the 1980s, and there are certain things that go with that, and we should not be surprised that footballers on the Gold Coast follow those things. It's always going to be a challenge for them until it becomes more like a real city, which is actually happening up on the Gold Coast. So we'll see. In future years, like in 10 years' time, it might be entirely much more like an Australian capital city, but there's a lot of culture to get past, a lot of baggage to get past as well. And I'm not sure how they're going to achieve that.
Well, it has been said that Eid has needed to bring in a bit of a culture change. There was a bit of a drinking culture, a bit of a lad culture with the Suns, and he's made some tough decisions, and maybe some players haven't necessarily liked that. It'll be interesting to see how they go next year, whether they can recover and become the final side, which everyone expected them to be this year.
I think they can. You look at just 4 of their outs. Ablett, O'Meara, Prestia and Swallow. That's a really strong midfield there that's just been off the park for most of the year. So I think they'll bounce back.
Yeah.
For me, my main concern about Gold Coast is I'm not really all that impressed by their defence. And if we're talking about a premiership side, which is what these expansion teams, it certainly was the aim, it's why they were drafted the way they did and recruited the way they did, I think that for me is their clear weakness. There's not really anyone there that I'd say is someone that you'd say, I've got to get them at Port Adelaide straight away. You reckon there is?
Keep going. I reckon there's probably 2 players that I'd love at Port, and that's Rory Thompson. I think he's a really good key defender. Maybe a little bit laconic at times, but I think in maybe another 2 or 3 seasons he'll probably be All-Australian level. And Kay Kolajasny's had a wonderful year, and if he's not talked about, he'd be just about on the verge of making the All-Australian squad with this season at the moment. He's one of the only 2 players that have played every game this year, and he'd be an absolute monster in a side like Port Adelaide, I reckon.
Oh, really? Who would you drop for him or trade for him?
Broadbent, Pittard. Anyone?
We're not trading Pittard.
I reckon he's an absolute superstar.
Fair enough.
You don't sound convinced, but that's okay.
No, that's all right. I'm not...
I do agree, though. I think their defence is probably their weakest. I mean, you look at the other players in that side. I mean, I'm not a huge fan of Stephen May. He seems to be rated pretty highly across the AFL, but I don't necessarily see it. And they've got a lot of kids in there this week. Clay Cameron, Henry Shade, Sean Lemons. They've got a lot of kids in there, and they've got pretty much zero depth down back as well. Obviously, Malcheski's a great player, or was a great player. He's in the twilight of his career at the moment as well, but certainly I do agree that's probably a spot where they need to improve.
Yeah.
Malcheski's been a bit disappointing this year. Sort of went up there, past premiership player, was supposed to be a bit of a role model, but he just really hasn't got on the park enough or shown enough this year, considering how much they paid for him.
Yeah, no, that's a good call. I think he had a pretty good start to the season, but missed 6 or 7 games, and that's probably cost him a little bit of momentum going up there. And I mean, they were probably hoping that he'd be one of the keys to really sort of push them over the edge to making the finals, and it just hasn't happened. But yes, John Butcher, eh?
Johnny Butcher.
John Butcher lasts another week. He's still in the side. He's named on the interchange bench at the moment. Might as well talk about the changes to the sides. Charlie Dixon comes in for the Suns. As we mentioned before the podcast, maybe it's a bit of a bit of a look and see for Port Adelaide. See how he goes. Adam Sard's had a really good year. He's come out of the side, as has Josh Hull. Into Port Adelaide's lineup is Matty Lobe. He's back. Aaron Young's back, and Carl Amon to add a little bit of pace. Kane Mitchell has been omitted, which is pretty straightforward, I would have thought. Jakey Need's been omitted for family reasons. Not sure what's going on there. And Jay Schultz is out of the side with a bit of a back injury, or so they say.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I guess Noah Nidau, there's not much you can do about that. But I also would say that I don't think we miss him too much. I think he's been all right, and I probably wouldn't have gone out to drop him otherwise. But I think that he's replaceable with our current squad. Mitchell out. Where is Kane Mitchell now? I'm finding it really, like, the last couple of weeks we've been talking about how good Port Adelaide's played, and I don't think Mitchell's been a very important part of that at all. Is he just going to be purely a depth player, like, completely now? Are we sort of saying he's got a cap on him now, or what's going on with Mitchell?
I think his timing's a bit unfortunate, because last week he came on sort of mid last quarter, and by that time Archie was just dominating on the field. So he's kind of finding it really hard to fit in now with Archie showing that level of form. But he did set up a goal in the first couple of seconds when he came on last week.
He's kind of like... Yeah. I kind of feel like that's mostly what
I'm not
he does. Like, if Kane Mitchell doesn't do something in the first couple of seconds, I sort of think he has to go back to the bench and try again in 5 minutes. I don't know. I think he's still very much the burst, and if we're talking about removing the sub rule at the end of the year, then I don't know how that affects us.
I still think they're trying to work through the list, and that was his chance to to maybe get another contract for next year. I'm not sure if he's contracted or not for 2016, but there may be a chance that he is, and Mace will get delisted anyway. So maybe that was his chance. Youngie comes back in. He's had about 15 last chances, so. I guess it's probably interesting to see how he will go. We know he is actually contracted for next year. Maybe they're looking at trading him, maybe not. I guess we'll see what happens there as well.
Well, one thing to keep in mind for Mitchell is that he's on 8 SANFL games for the year and 8 AFL games for the year. And I think that the way the finals qualification works for the SANFL is you have to have played more of the SANFL games. So if he were to play this week, he wouldn't be able to play in the SANFL finals.
I think, okay, I'm going to annoy one club fans here. I think that if we're making any sort of decisions about the AFL side on the basis of what's better for the Magpies, we are making terrible decisions as a club, and we are going to fail. So I really, really, really hope that that's not the reason why he's being dropped this week. I certainly hope that we don't do anything to drop players back or keep them in the side for the reason of having a strong Magpies side for finals, because that is always got to be, absolutely has to be our secondary concern. when the majority of income for the club comes through the Adelaide, comes through the AFL team, and that's the one that most members actually support. So I really hope that's not the reason. I hope it's just that they decide from inside.
I don't think anyone can disagree with that.
I mean, it's quite possible he got dropped so he can qualify for finals, or it's possible he got dropped because he got one kick last week. So I don't know. It's probably maybe a bit of both. You never know.
I hope it's only
does anything really concern you guys about this game? I guess we're expecting a win. Is there a chance that we may be a little bit lethargic going out there?
I kind of feel like both sides will probably be a little bit lethargic going out there. Like for Port Adelaide, it's like that we no longer have the mathematical chance, realistically. Whereas last week we might have been able to half convince ourselves that we did have the mathematical chance for finals. And have we even played at Gold Coast before, at the Metricon Stadium before? Have we played? Okay.
Yeah, that's when Westhoff got that soccered goal that was almost goal of the year.
Okay, so it's not like it's a... okay, so we've played there before, so we won't get overawed by that, but I don't know. I feel like Gold Coast have probably got more reason to play well, so that's going to be on their side, even if their home crowd is probably not all that big. I guess, just back on the selections quickly, if we can, I guess the only real concern I've got about this side is that we've dropped Schultz, and the fact that we're bringing Lobby in as the tall. I don't have an issue with that necessarily, but I think that obviously with 2 games left, we've decided that we're done giving other key forwards on our list a go. This could have been the sort of game, particularly as we talked about how their defence is sort of this could have been the game we played someone like Shaw or Harvey, or I suppose even Logan Austin if he's fit, as an option for this game, just to get them a bit of touch, see how they can do, see if they sort of fit in or what's going on. And clearly, I think we've put made the decision there that we're not going to play any new players for these last 2 games. So I'm a little bit disappointed in that. I think because it leaves us with another season where we haven't really blooded a new tall forward.
Harvey missed last week in the SANFL through injuries. Come back into the SANFL lineup this week. I'm not sure where Mason Shaw is. I think he was injured a couple of weeks ago, so maybe that's the reason why they're just sticking with Butcher.
Yeah, I mean, look, there's probably good reasons why, but it's like every week there's probably a really good reason why. But if you make it only as a week-by-week decision, then that's how you end up in Taco Land, where you have no development of the team below your first 22.
Yeah. But I guess they're still trying to make this 2-ruck system work, so obviously Ryder, I think, will play majority up forward. Westhoff a centre-half forward, Butcher hanging around there as well. Might be a bit of a game where Butcher can get a bit of a run on and maybe snag a few goals, because I'm not sure who's really going to go to him. Maybe Henry Shade. He's probably the more natural matchup for Butcher, I would think.
Yeah, it's probably the first time Butcher's had the forward line in a true sense to himself. Like, he is the number 1 key forward this week.
I don't agree. I kind of feel like I think if Butch has a good game this week, it'll be because Gold Coast have decided they're more worried about Westhoff and Ryder, which I think would be, if I was Gold Coast, I'd be more concerned about Westhoff and Ryder than I would be about Butcher.
Yeah.
Oh, no doubt, but you never know. Fingers crossed Butch can have a bit of a performance this week, and maybe it might go some way towards getting another contract. I guess there's been talk. There's a lot of people, backing behind the Butch getting a new deal. Even some at the club are sort of, starting to make some noises that might actually happen. So I don't know. I guess I never really would have seen that maybe 10 weeks ago. I never would have expected him to get another deal for next year.
Like he's been playing all right. It's just his set shots. Like, his field kicking's not too bad. It's just his set shots which is the issue. What do you guys think about that?
Nah, I think that we have
I still think he's got a lot of issues with his game. I still don't think he knows how to lead in terms of when to go, how hard to go. He often overshoots the lead. He's got to double back. Sometimes he's completely out of position, nowhere near the bowl, so that the only thing he can literally do is crash the pack and hope for a spoil. He just never really seems to take any sort of uncontested marks at all. You never see him go on a 15 or 20 metre lead and mark it out, eyes in front. It's always sort of a contested mark. His positioning's all out. I still think, personally, I think his kicking is some way down the list of his issues at the moment.
I kind of feel like if we were coaching a Disney sports film instead of the Port Adelaide Football Club, he'd be the underdog that everyone says, oh, you can't make it, Butch, you can't make it. But you know what? He would make it. He would. And I think we love that narrative, but I don't think it's going to happen.
Suddenly I have a feeling of going, quack, 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 quack.
Yeah, exactly.
Quack, quack.
Go the Mighty Ducks.
Yeah, absolutely. So who's going to tear the Suns apart this week?
That's a good question. I'm going to say Jack Hodge.
Okay.
I'm hoping Carl Amon has a bit of a breakout. He's looked a little bit out of place the last few games, but I'm hoping he sort of has a bit of just a really good game this week.
Yeah.
Well, look, 2 weeks ago we saw Archie have his breakout game. Last week we saw Sammy Gray have his breakout game. These things come in threes, so it's either got to be Jarman Impey playing in the midfield and getting 35 touches, or Carl Amon having a ripper game.
I think that, look, either of those could happen, but I just sort of feel like Jack Homsch is in a position where he will be able to run around the back line, get lots of marks, and just be completely frustrating and annoying to the Gold Coast Suns this week. I think that I think that the matchups favour our defence, quite honestly, and I think that he'll be the one that is the visible demonstration of that. But if you talk about the young blokes coming on, Amon might do all right. It really depends on how he's played, I guess. But you say these things come in threes, and I'm not convinced that they will this week. But
Spoil sport. Oh, I love it. So who plays on Dixon?
Jonas.
Yep.
Yeah, well, I've got to say part of it for me is I want to see what Dixon's capable of, and for me, the thing that Dixon needs to be capable of if we want to trade for him, is that he needs to show that he's capable of beating a guy that's shorter than he is, but is kind of bullocky. Because if he can't beat that guy, then I have suddenly doubts about getting him in. So I want to see him on Jonas, but I don't know whether that'll be the actual matchup or not.
Yeah.
I hope
we do have the 3 tolls up there.
Yeah.
I hope Dixon realises that he'd rather be kicking goals for Port than having to deal with our defenders by the end of the match.
I just want to see him not limp off.
Yeah, well,
I mean, he's limped off probably his last sort of 6 or 7 games.
Yeah. Well, James Hird used to limp off a lot too. I don't think it really affected him too much.
True.
Yeah. I think that obviously we haven't changed our defensive lineup at all at this point. So realistically, I think we're just going to be playing the same defence we played the last few weeks, and we're just going to completely try and frustrate their supply. And I think that they've had enough injuries that we are in a strong position to be able to continue to do that. I think really the only question is how focused we are and whether we follow the team rules enough to get the win. It's going to be a real test of Port Adelaide's focus and commitment to playing as a team, I think, this week, more than anything else.
Yep, that's fair. I'm hoping to see Nathan Cracker have a ripper game on Harley Bennell. I think he'll go to him and hopefully shut him out of the game. I think Pittard on Matera is going to be a pretty interesting matchup. The player that I think is going to have an outstanding game is probably going to be Robbie Gray. I think he's just going to tear shit up out there and maybe get 30 and 3 and be best on ground.
That'd be nice.
Need Wingard to keep his goal streak going.
Yep.
Yeah, that'll probably happen.
And to get some more of the ball, I want to see him get 30 touches and hopefully push back towards that 20 touch average for the season.
Yeah, it would be amazing if he can average 2.5 goals and 20 touches for the season. That's just ridiculous numbers.
Yeah.
It's a dream. It's a dream number, that one, having that sort of average for obviously that attacking midfielder. Every club in the league wants that sort of player. So if we've got them, if we're the archetype of that, then we are very lucky people.
And I don't think those sort of stats have happened in the AFL for a long, long time. I mean, we always sort of bring up, Paul Chapman or Stevie J, but not even them have Not
No.
even those have averaged 20 and 2 a game. I think you're probably having to go back to one of Lee Matthews' years, which is a very long time ago.
Yeah. Was Akmanis reasonably close?
He never averaged 2 goals a game across his career, I don't think, from memory.
Yeah, that's fair enough. Yeah, it probably would be. Yeah, Lee Matthews, probably. I can't think of anyone outside of that.
Not bad company.
No,
Yeah.
not at all.
I mean, yeah, that would be all right. Yeah. Yeah. There we go.
Just a quick one, a bit of a strange one, talking about maybe Brownlow votes, and obviously we're not going to get as many votes as last year. Gray was one of the favourites last year, polled pretty poorly. Boakey was up there. Has Chad Wingard a sneaky chance to maybe get in the top sort of 4 or 5 vote getters?
It'll be all heavy-ended to the back of the year because the start of the year wasn't bad, but it was a little bit lean at the first 5 to 10 weeks.
Yeah, I think that this is just. I think the performance of the team this year is just a really good, not excuse, but a really good reason to split the votes around. Like, I think we've had every week. I think we've had a whole bunch of people bob up and down as potential people getting Brownlow votes. Realistically, if we're going to have someone in the top 5, it's got to be someone that that gets token votes every week, and they say, yeah, I've got to pick someone from Port because it was a close match or because they won. Who am I going to pick? And I still think Robbie Gray is going to be leading that. I can't imagine that Chad will poach that this year, maybe next year. But I think we might see some pity votes or some Robbie Gray pity votes. Where I say pity, they probably actually deserved them, but the umpires have just felt that they're not in a position to give votes 3-2-1 to the opposition every game.
Watching the Brownlow last year, I got the sense that the umpires didn't actually know who Robbie Gray was for the first half of the year because I don't think he polled hardly anything in the first half last year.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, if we're talking about Brownlow injustices, I find it hard to get. I think that my brain sorted out after Warren Treadray in 2004, quite honestly. That was it. That was it for me. Like, after that, I don't think I've ever bothered about a Brownlow since then. I don't think there's really any opportunity for a Port Adelaide player to win it, so we'll see.
That's a good call. So, predictions, who's going to win? What's the margin going to be?
Look, I feel like we should win, so I'm actually going to be annoyed if we don't. I'm going, but I don't think we will. I think we should, but I don't think we will. I think it's going to be Gold Coast by about 6 goals. But I think we should win.
Gold Coast by 6 goals. Okay.
Yeah, sorry.
I don't know how to respond to that.
I'm going to say we'll win by 5 goals. I think Gold Coast's form has been picking up the last few weeks. But we should win, and I think we'll win by about 5 goals.
I'm really worried now that I've actually tipped Gold Coast by 6 goals if even Macca's querying tipping the opposition.
I'm going to pick Port by 6 points. I think it's going to be a pretty dour game. Not one to record, not one to watch in the future, I don't think. But still hoping for Robbie Gray to get 30 and 3 and also Johnny Butcher to kick a few goals as well.
I would be a little bit wary if it's really wet up there, because that brings both teams real close together, I think.
Yeah, no, I think we win if it's wet.
And look, Fishing Rick's going up there. He's going to be at the game, as is Crazy Big Al. So we know that we can always blame Rick if we do lose. Next thing up, we did this a couple of weeks ago and I thought we should maybe do another one. So what I've done is done a bit of an Ask the Podcast thread on Big Footy, and we've come back with a number of really good quality questions. So we've got quite a bit to work through here. So the first is by Portmanteau, which is regarding rookie listing a current Port Magpie, such as Stevie Summerton or Benny Sawford. This question is, how should we approach this from a list management and one club perspective, considering that a player would likely be replaced by a lesser able $400 a week player, limited by the new conditions, and B, if it doesn't actually work out, it seems that they would be lost to the Port Adelaide Footy Club when delisted.
I think what is important to say is that any decision we make should be made for the benefit of the AFL side. So that should be, for my mind, the first consideration. But I think that if we do talk about one club in the aspect of everything outside of that, I think if we're looking at, okay, well, what is best for one club? And I feel like the reality is that what's best for one club is that players that come and play for the Magpies that aren't on the senior list, that aren't on the AFL list, that they feel there's some chance of progression. Because if you recall before Port Adelaide's AFL entry, we had no problem at all getting players in from interstate and other clubs to come and play at the Magpies, because it was seen at that level as being a pathway to playing at the top level. And I think that we saw a similar thing, say, 10 years ago with Box Hill and Hawthorn when Sammy Mitchell got picked up. Like, doing that occasionally and having the player work out, like, that shows that there's a pathway, and that's going to have a knock-on effect for the SANFL side. So I think that if they're good enough for the AFL side, rookie them, don't worry about the rest of it. But also, from a Magpies perspective, I don't think they should fear, like, even if it comes to complications, I don't think that they should fear losing a player to the power list and how that shuffles their side, because I think that makes the Magpies a more attractive destination for those second tier of football players.
Yep.
No, I totally agree with that. That's...
I don't really have too much more to add to that. I agree 100%. I think it really depends on that specific player. Obviously, guys like, if we're going to go sort of the Benny Salford route, you obviously hope that he's got the progression to become a long-term AFL player. Someone like Stevie Summerton, I guess, you just got to take that risk, and if it means that he can't play for the Maggies, if he gets delisted, 12 months down the track, then, so be it, because you're going to be picking Stevie Summerton as a bit of a Josh Marnie type pick and hoping that sort of player can help push you over the edge for a premiership.
Yeah, absolutely. I guess that the main query I'd have is the players that we're talking about, like, are they people that fill a need for our AFL side in the first place? Because we're already getting at the stage, for example, where I think that we're, as far as second-tier midfielders that are okay and, say, halfbacks, I think that we're already really well covered on our list for that. And I don't think there's a need to spend any more speculative picks on players in that ilk. I think that we really need to focus on continuing to recruit for our weaknesses, but also just continuing to recruit, ready-made players. And I don't think they're necessarily at the Magpies.
Sam Gray was the first example of one club transition, wasn't he? Is that right?
Yeah, really, yeah. Coming from a Port Adelaide Magpies zoned area, yeah, I'd say yes, he would be.
All right, moving on. Next question. We've got a couple of questions by Long Live PAFC, so we'll go through them one by one. The first one is, where do we need Ryder more, in the ruck or up forward? And I guess my answer to that is, why not both?
Yeah, the little Mexican girl from the El Paso ad.
Exactly.
I think that if we look at look at his form this year, I think that what he has brought to ruck recently has far surpassed what he had brought to the forward line at any point this year. So on that basis, I think he's more important to us as a ruckman, but I can see that we would continue to play him with a strong forward presence next year.
Some of the highlights from his rucking against Hawthorn were quite amazing. Like, he just do the slight twist of the hand and direct it straight down the throat of Sam Gray or Robbie Gray or even Chad Wingard when he was going through there. Some amazing tap work last week.
Yeah. And so for that reason,
I think he's clearly our most natural ruckman, our best, ruck option, and he's probably our best option as a second tall forward as well. So ultimately, you would love to have two of him. I think his best position is in the ruck, rather than up forward, personally.
Yeah, if we didn't have a gaping hole in our forward line, then he'd be a ruckman every day of the week.
Yep. Which leads into our second question, which is, does Lobie play again if we get Dixon? And could we reverse the roles of Lobie and Ryder?
I don't think we could reverse the roles of Lobie and Ryder, because I don't think Lobie has the combination of tank and speed to do what Ryder does up forward. I don't think...
Or the fact that he can't actually take a mark.
Well, there's that
a
as
big
well.
Cross.
But I mean, we're not worrying about that for Butch, are we? So I'm not going to necessarily worry about that for Lobie in this particular hypothetical. Sure. I think that if Dixon doesn't change it, I don't think Dixon changes at all. If anything, he's probably going to take a spot away from a halfback flanker, because if we have a decent forward line, then there's not quite so much need to rely on our halfbacks bringing it down the line and then sort of bombing it long and hoping. will have a proper structure, and that means if you have a proper forward structure, it means you can have less people in defence. So I think that's more likely to be the balance change myself.
It's probably the thing I'm looking forward to most this week. It's just seeing that combination working again, because we haven't actually seen it that much this year, the Lobie Ryder thing. So I'm actually genuinely looking forward to just seeing if they can get that to work somewhat a little bit better than earlier in the year.
I think that if we look back at, I suppose, I don't think it's really unfair to say. I think if we look through the golden age of Port Adelaide ruckwork, which we all saw in the early 2000s, which I think that is pretty safe to say over the history of the club, that was the golden age of ruckwork. We had a weird advantage, which made it possible for us to have two good ruckmen at any given time, which is that we had a huge number of long-term season-ending injuries for ruckmen. And what that did is that it gave different guys the opportunity to be number one ruckman for a long enough time that they developed their style, that the team got to know them pretty well, that they worked out how they were going to play the role. And so we saw Matthew Primus come out and have a full season.
That's right. During those heyday years, we had Primus. We had Primus, we had Lade, and we had Brogan all at the same time. And they were all A graded.
They were sort of were like, but the reason they were, and this is more later in that run, is because they had all had the opportunity to work out how to play the role as the number one, and so when it came time, they were already experienced players. So if they're going into being the second ruck or the third ruck or whatever else, they already had enough confidence in their own style, in what the teammates were doing, whatever else. They had that necessary on-ground experience of just managing the rucks, so that they could actually reduce that role and do something else at the same time. And I think that that's what we're seeing is the problem with Ryder and Lobby, and probably more particularly Lobby, is that they have some experience being the number one ruck. They could both do a bit more, but it's hard to get that understanding of how you're going to fit in with the rest of your team in less than a full game. Like it's probably the most, I think, outside of something like a full back role where you start with on a key forward and you try and find them all game and work out how it's going to ebb and flow. I think it's the same thing with ruckman, very much so, in that you see how it's going, you see where the contest is going to be fought, both in terms of how the opposition ruck lines up, how the opposition midfielders are lining up, how the umpiring is going to be done for the game, because that's a huge thing in ruck. And I think that if you have to come in and out and you're not really confident in how you're playing, and how your teammates are going to play around you and how they're going to match up against the opponent, it becomes much more challenging to be at your peak effectiveness in that role. And so I think that's why we're seeing, when Lobby was the number one ruckman all last year, he had his best form. When Lobby's been out of the side, Ryder's suddenly come into his best form. It's because they've had the time to get used to that role exclusively. And I think it's harder to find sides with two good ruckmen that haven't also had a lot of time as the number one ruckman in that same team.
For Loeb's career, if he were to spend all of next year in the SANFL, how much damage would that do to his career?
I think it'd be a huge
significant.
Yeah, but if he broke his knee, touching wood, I'm touching a forest here. If he stuffed up his knee in the pre-season and missed the season and came back the year after, I think Ryder would be better for it, and I think that Lobby would probably still come back okay, potentially. I think that it's just useful to have that long period, particularly for Ryder coming into the club fresh, that long period where you are the number one ruckman for a while, just so you can work out, what Robbie Gray is going to do, what Ollie Wines is going to do, and all that sort of thing. But hopefully they've found some way to fast-track that. I guess having a good ruck coach can do that too. But we'll see, a good midfield coach. And that's
do you think it's too much of a contingency insurance to have two A-grade ruckmen just in case? Say, imagine if Ryder got injured next year and we traded Lobie. That would pretty much end premiership hope if we were to lose an A-grade ruckman and not have someone, if we just have Redden or something like that remaining. So do you think it's actually worth paying that little bit extra just to have that sort of insurance policy?
I don't see it as an insurance policy, because I think that the main thing that's made people go away from having two ruckmen, in my view, in recent years, is the sub rule. In that the sub rule has sort of taken away a traditional, okay, we'll keep a tall on the bench, and replaced it with okay, we'll keep a guy that's either marginally fit or is good on the burst in the side. I don't see a reason why you wouldn't always have two ruckmen, and if you're reducing the number of interchanges as well, potentially, then I think it becomes almost more important to have ruckmen that can play a whole game or at least a solid half of it every week. Because, as you say, if you have the main guy go down, then you're really kind of stuffed. We've seen some very good sides that have lost ruckman when they've had shallow depth there, and they just sort of really can fall apart if they're midfield focused. I think that's probably the one advantage of the way we set it right now is that we can play with a losing ruck because we do set it with a slingshot, but it does commit us to that because we're conceding the clearance almost to a large extent.
It's interesting, we've now discussed the sub-rule for a little bit, so that was one of Andre's questions, was do you think the removal of the sub-rule will change how we line up next year? And do we see Port benefiting or being disadvantaged? And I'd say I actually see us benefiting from it. And I do think it's going to change the way that not just us, but every team sort of lines up.
Well, I mean, there's no doubt it's going to change the fitness requirements of every side. There's no doubt about that. And I think that, as you say, we are well placed to do that because we've got a lot of faith in Burgess right now. And if we've had people complaining about how we're all trained to be like soccer players and whatever else, well, if you take out sub-rule and replace it with a player and if you reduce the interchanges, then you need to have that kind of endurance where you can play like a soccer player. So even if that slur on Burgess is correct, then we're in an even better position than I'm talking about. But I don't think it'll disadvantage us. I don't think it'll disadvantage us more than anyone else. No.
When you think of that,
I think
question,
with the sub rule and the cut to the rotation, so I think they're looking at going to 80 rotations. I think it's at 120 at the moment. I think we're going to see a lot more slower game of football being played next year and beyond, and I think that really does suit having two more ruckmen out there, to be honest. So I think the Lobie and Ryder experiment, well, it's not really an experiment anymore, but I think that will work wonders next year.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. I think it's really just going to come down to the type of fitness. So I know that it's feasible to say it's a reason to play slower players and expect them to do better. But I think what it really means is that if you've got a fast player that's got endurance, so back in the old day, the unique blend of speed and endurance, if you've got that sort of player around, then that's just going to be a huge advantage going forward because the pace is always still going to be a huge edge on your opponents. And I think we've got that, and I think we've got it with enough endurance to be able to get away from the sort of impact running that we've seen sides rely on, and particularly us in the last 2 or 3 years.
Geelong will be absolutely laughing with Blick subs then.
Oh, no doubt.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely. Another question from Long Live PAFC is, can Schultz play as anything other than the number one forward?
No.
No, I don't think so either.
Has he ever?
No, he did for a little bit at Richmond, but outside of that, not really, no.
He was centre-half back for them for a while, but yeah.
Next question, Stuart to Austin. Are we likely to see Hinkley re-engage in his Trengover centre-half forward experiment like he did at times in 2013? And once again, my answer to that question is I don't think so.
No, because he knows the list better now.
Yeah, I can't see any benefit of that.
Plus, we've got better forward options. We've got more forwards on our list. If we do get Dixon, that's going to be Dixon and Ryder and Westhoff in the side. Hopefully, someone like Harvey or Shaw or Howard's going to be really pushing for games as well. So I don't think we actually need to be playing or experimenting with Trengove at centre half forward.
No.
A bit of a long question here from Chewy, which is, as of late, a few media types have claimed that Port's defence is too top-heavy when we play Homsch, Carlisle and Trengove in the same side. He also notes that more teams seem to be dropping down to a two-tall forward approach with a lot of medium, sort of Gunston or Monfries types in terms of style and size. Furthermore, none of our back tolls are of the sort of Harry Taylor or Ben Reid variety who can actually swing forward and jag a few goals. If all three were at 100% fitness and health, but we could only play two, who would you leave out and why?
Can I answer the first part first?
Yep.
Which is that I don't think we're too tall in defence. I think that
Nope.
we were talking about only 2 weeks ago against GWS about how we have a height deficiency in our key defenders. It's not a deficiency, but against the the young side. So we're talking about, I suppose, GWS specifically and Gold Coast. Potentially, our defence needs as many tall options as it has. And I also think we've seen that they are still good producers, even when there's not really important tall matches up against them. I think that we've had in the last, really since Buddy Franklin went to Sydney, with two key forward league, because when they had, I suppose even back further, they had Buddy and they had Roughhead and Boyle, I suppose even at Hawthorn, three pretty okay-ish tall forwards, where the third one's just tall enough. You're still going to need three tall defenders on them. And our guys have shown, I think, like Homsch, for example, I think he's okay, good enough to play a bit shorter if he needs to. I don't see anything wrong with our current tall backline lineup. But if we had to drop one of Carlisle, Trengo and Homsch, I think that the one you'd be dropping or relocating, I suppose, based on needs, would probably be Trengo, because I think Carlisle is going to be a fullback. And I think Homsch is only going to be a back, whereas Trengo has some versatility.
I'm going to say that I actually disagree in that he says that a lot of teams are going to a two tall forward approach. I actually think a lot of teams are still playing three key forwards, and therefore three tall defenders are actually needed. I'd also disagree with calling Jack Unson a medium sort of size forward, considering he's 193, 194 centimetres, but certainly he's very, very mobile. But he does still have that sort of height to him. I do agree that we don't have, none of our defenders I would have any sort of trust in playing up forward or snagging a couple of goals. But I would say if I was to drop one of them, if we had to, it would have to be Jack Homsch.
Yeah, if you had to drop, you'd probably drop Homsch, but I think if you could relocate Trengo.
I think our team plays at its best when we've got the defensive midfield sort of rotating through defence and playing the small defender role, gut running sort of style. I think you need those big key defenders to compete with the other key forwards, and yeah, it's just sort of a team effort to do the small defender roles.
I kind of feel...
I'd be keeping Trengo because he's got genuine height. He can take the monsters. Carlisle was a very, very good shutdown defender. And for me, the reason why I would be dropping Jack Homsch, if it had to come to that, would be because I just don't think at the moment he's capable of taking the number one key defender, as his form since Carlisle's been out of the side has shown. So that would be my reasoning there.
I guess another thing to consider is that traditionally a good defender is usually a couple of years older than the equivalent good forward. And the reality is that what people are considering to be a good key forward going forward, they're like guys at 197 centimetres. So the reality is that someone like Homsch, he's a medium defender in the new world of 5 years' time. So I don't think that's going to be an issue going forward against top forwards, because there's going to be guys that are bigger and taller than the guys we've already got. I think we're well positioned.
Yep. Another question from Andre. Dear podcast, can Fishing Rick and Porsche duel it out on an elevated platform, gladiator style, to see who is Macca's co-host going forward?
I don't like
His
heights.
money's on Porsche.
I don't like heights. No thanks.
See, Rick's probably already got the padding, so I don't think he really needs any sort of gladiator style padding. So my money would be on Fishing Rick.
Yeah, I would probably just try and stand up there and do a crane kick like Karate Kid, and if they didn't come off, I'd be in trouble.
If our attendances ever drop at Adelaide Oval, I think we have a solution to keep people coming through the gates.
Next question, Chad Wingoat. Would you trade Lobie, and if so, to who and for what price? And would we be able to snag Dixon at the expense of Lobie and keep our first round pick?
I have no idea, because it depends on what the demand is, and I think it's very iffy as to what it will be this year. I think next year will be more obvious once we see what the effects of the interchange rule are and the removal of the sub. What was the second part of that question? I've forgotten.
Would we be able to snag Dixon at the expense of Lobie and also keep our first round pick?
Nah, no way.
Yeah, I can't see that happening. Simply because it would have to be a three-way deal. I'm not sure how we would get around that. And still end up keeping our first pick. I'm not too sure. I don't think Gold Coast are in the in the running for a ruckman. I think they're pretty happy with Tom Nichols, I think. Would I trade Lobie? I probably would, to be honest. I've maybe thought about that a fair bit this year and last year as well. To who and for what price, I'm not too sure. I think there's probably a couple of teams that are searching for ruckman. Essendon's probably one. Maybe the Bulldogs might be another. For what price would we be able to get? I don't think ruckman, certainly in recent history, have gone for all that high. So I think we'd have to be trading him for maybe underneath what his actual worth to our club is. I
think this is where you start, and I know we're talking about people here, so it is quite ghoulish for some people. But I have no morals, so it's fine. Which is that you need to look at market activity and what the market is concerned about. And I think that right now the rule changes that we're talking about so far today about the interchange rule and the sub rule, I think now is not a time that other clubs will be thinking, let's invest in an extra ruckman, which was what they'd be doing with Lobby. I don't think this is the time that people are going to say, yeah, let's go out for a ruckman, because I don't think they know what the effect of those rules is going to be. I don't know whether they think the removal of the sub rule is going to bring back the fact that you need a second ruckman, or if it's going to do something else in this more updated world. So I think that next year, into next year, when we know what's going to happen, we'll have a better idea of what Lobby's capable of and what his worth is to our side, and every other club will have a better idea of that as well. So I think if we were going to trade him, we should hang on to him for another year regardless.
Yeah, I agree. I'd just give the two ruck system a chance.
Yep. Absolutely. Next question is from Glitch. Looking at the likes of Moore, Young and Mitchell, do we keep the likes of Mitchell who work hard and always give 100% whether at SANFL or AFL level, or do we persist with Moore and Young who appear to have more talent but fail to deliver consistently? And do any of them have any real trade value?
No. The last part, no.
No, I wouldn't think so. I think Youngie might have a little bit. I've heard around the traps that there might be one or two clubs that are, maybe a little bit interested in him, but I certainly don't think Moore's got any trade value. He's out of contract as well, so people can just wait until we delist him. Similar to like the Benny Newton situation last year. Kane Mitchell, I would significantly doubt would have any trade value at all, and maybe for Youngie we might get a late second round pick, but that would be the ceiling on that one, I would think.
Yeah, I wouldn't even expect that. If another club is interested in Young, it means they probably think they can get him for free or close to it.
Young, I still hold out some hope for. He's probably played the best AFL footy of the three, maybe the most consistent as well. Just need him to get some more outside bowl at AFL level, I think. Moore's just been a little bit disappointing, and Mitchell, I think, with his size and height and kicking deficiencies, I think he's always going to be up against it.
I kind of feel like Aaron Young is tracking for a Paul Stewart career. He could be on our list for another 4 or 5 years realistically, but I don't think he's going to make it at this point. But I also don't know if he's got much trade value. So it comes down to what value, what sort of season do we think we're going to have next year, and what value do we have, or do we place on the fact that we could have Young as a backup next year as opposed to having another recent draftee that we're not sure whether they'll be able to play or not. Are we willing to make that punt? And I think with Mitchell, I might be able to. Moore, I definitely would, but Young, I'd probably think he's probably just valuable enough that I'd keep him on the list in preference to what we could replace him with in the draft.
Yeah. I think he's still an important depth player for us. He's still going to be around the mark. He's probably going to be at emergency level next year and either just in or just out of the side. So I'd certainly want to see at least one of those players kept this year, or next year, sorry. And for me, that's Aaron Young. So the last question we've got is from Manure ID, which is a bit of a drinks question. So I'm going to change it around a little bit. What's your favourite tipple, Portia?
The one I would have most commonly would be vodka and orange juice. I did discover a couple of weeks ago cherry Dr Pepper and vodka, which I really quite enjoy. It's weird, but it's good. Anyway, that's me.
I'll take the crab juice, thanks.
Yeah, cup kalash. Yeah, that's it. Nothing exciting. I don't really get into wines or beers, really. Sorry, it's boring.
Just keep it simple. Have a West End.
Hey, that's the way.
Geez, the only way it could be more Port Adelaide is if you said Southwark Premium.
Southwark. Oh. I remember that stuff. For me, it's probably a mix of beer or wine. I love my wine. Got a pretty neat little cellar. Love it. Beer, love it. Straight Scotch, enjoy it. I'm not really all that fussy. I'm not prejudiced against booze.
Yeah. I mean, you hate to think there's some lonely booze out there that no one likes.
All right, on that note, let's hope it's a winning weekend for Port Adelaide. And, of course, the Maggies play West Adelaide this week, I think, as well, the last match before the finals.
That's interesting, because that game will decide who gets the second chance.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Win their 5th straight and get into some good form heading into the finals. All right, until next time, calm Port Adelaide.
Count the power.
Can't appear.
One last hurrah. Loads up. They need a mark and then a goal. Westhoff almost. Motlop couldn't quite. Enright. Good tackle. Cassisi to win it. Cassisi does win it. Oh!